presented by Satyakala Vijayanand. I apologise if I didn't do well with that. From Perth Children's Hospital in Western Australia. She's talking about familial short stature. It is not always a normal variant. Thank you, Satyakala.
Hi, everyone. So my presentation today is familial short stature. It's not always a normal variant. So this case has given me a little bit of more insight to think beyond familial short stature. So our case today is AJ, who was referred to as a 10 years and 10-month-old with short stature. He was born at 38 plus 6 weeks of gestation by elective cesarean section. His birth weight and length both were on the 50th centile. The main complaint he had was stiff and painful joints, which was impacting his physical activities. As we can see here in his height centile chart, when he was referred with short stature at 10 years and 10 months, the Z-score was minus 2.61 on first centile. He had a tall father, and his mother's height, mother was short with mid-parental height between 10th to 25th centile. However, in the extremes of parent stature, MPH is not always accurate. His weight was on 75th centile, an arm span of 131 centimeters. Upper segment to lower segment ratio was 0.9. Hence, from anthropometry, he had proportionate short stature. The three-generational family tree revealed, in addition to AJ, AJ's mother, maternal uncle, and maternal grandmother was short, and their average height was 145 centimeters, and they required some form of surgery to correct the abnormal curvature of the bones. And his brothers were of average, AJ's brothers were of average height. So we now have a 10-year and 10-month-old boy with proportionate short stature, likely familial. On examination, general examination, he had no dysmorphism. He did have a waddling gait, bilateral varus deformity of the knees, and limited internal and external rotation of his hips, with no leg length discrepancy or scoliosis. His systemic examination was normal, and his Tanner staging, he was stage 2 to 3 with bilateral testicular volume of 6 mL. His baseline investigations for the growth, celiac serology was negative with a normal IGF-1 and IGF-BP3 levels and thyroid function test. His bone age was corresponding to his chronological age. He was further investigated with the lower limb X-rays because of the deformity he had with a special view, McVeigh view, which is a type of radiological projection to determine the axial alignment of the lower limbs. As we can see here, his weight-bearing axis on the right side lies about 30 millimeter from the tibial spine, on the left side about 32 millimeter medial to the tibial spine. In addition to that, he had a number of other abnormalities of his bones. He had bilateral coxa varo of the hips with varus deformity of femurs. And he also, it's not well appreciated in this X-ray, but he had inferior beaking of the proximal femoral metaphysis. He had symmetrical rhizomal leg shortening. The metaphysis were dense and broadened, and he had widening of his physis, the growth plate. So AJ was diagnosed with proportionate short stature on clinical examination. However, he had shortening of long bones on imaging. He was also consulted by the orthopedics at that stage, and he had a SHOX gene mutation testing, which was negative. The further genetic test at that stage was performed at Cincinnati Center by Dr. Andrew Dauber, who was doing a translational research for the growth disorders. So with regards to his management, when his genetic test was pending, he was started on Leucrin at 22.5 milligram 3 monthly to optimize the height and to determine the growth velocity for a year. And his growth velocity further dropped, and he qualified for the growth hormone injections at 12 years of age, which was 1 year after the Leucrin was started. At the same time, when his growth hormone was started, his Leucrin was stopped. I would like to point out the decision to stop Leucrin was at the discretion of the treating clinician to allow the progression through his puberty. And also there was a bit of reluctance to start him on growth hormone when he was having this lower limb deformities. So as the orthopedics was consulting, a couple of months after he was started on growth hormone, he had a procedure called epiphysiodesis. This is a surgical ablation of the growth plate to stop its future growth. It is generally used to correct a leg length discrepancy. So in AJ's situation, he had what is called hemiepiphyseresis, where the growth plate was interrupted only on the lateral side. As we can see, he has got screws on the lateral side of the bones, including the femur and also the fibula, and he had an 8 plate on the distal end of the femur. So this will interrupt only the growth of the lateral side of the bone, allowing the growth of the medial side to correct the deformity. And this is 2 years after the procedure. As we can see, he had some improvement on his right side of his varus deformity. However, on the left side, there was not much improvement. So we then had the results from the whole genome sequencing from Sennachi, and he detected pathogenic missense mutation on the collagen 10A1 gene, leading to a diagnosis of metaphyseal chondrodysplasia Schmidt type. As seen in the family tree, AJ's mother, uncle, and grandmother also carried the same mutation as AJ, and it has an autosomal dominant inheritance pattern. So did AJ benefit from multidisciplinary approach? Did his final outcome was in keeping with his other family members who had the same mutation, or did he have an improvement in the growth? Let's see at the end. So the broader approach to short stature, AJ had proportionate short stature on clinical examination. However, imaging did confirm shortening of the long bones, ruling in the likely cause of skeletal dysplasia. The diagnosis of skeletal dysplasias are made based on clinical and radiological classification. The radiology classification is broadly made depending on the different portions of the skeleton involved, such as epiphysis or metaphysis or diaphysis with or without involvement of the spine. In our patient, diagnosis was made based on the metaphyseal abnormality and also the genetics. And this figure here illustrates the components of the growth plate, the chondrocytes which are in different phases such as resting zone, proliferative zone, and the hypertrophic zone, where the enchondral ossification of the bone happens. The growth failure is caused by multiple molecular defects involving the hormone signaling, paracrine factors, or the intracellular process, or in extracellular matrix molecules, matrix defects, such as in our case, the type 10 collagen, the called 10A1 gene mutation. The type 10 collagen is also expressed exclusively by hypertrophic chondrocytes in the cartilage growth plates of the growing bones. So genetics of MCDS, the COL10A1 gene is mapped to chromosome 6q21 to 22 loci for type 10 collagen. It has 3 exons, as you can see here, and the mutations are predominantly point mutations, either missense mutations or frameshift point mutations or missense mutations. The type 10 collagen protein consists of 3 alpha chains. Mutations in the COL10A1 causes misfolding and accumulation of this type 10 collagen, which affects the growth and causes skeletal deformity. The diagnosis of MCDS can be made based on clinical characteristics and also radiology. The clinical findings predominantly are short limb, short stature by age 2 years, so they can be normal at birth with the growth. Genovarum, waddling gait, and they can have normal craniofacies and absence of extraskeletal manifestations. Radiographic findings typically as we saw in our case. And it is also important to rule out the metabolic bone disease such as rickets, which can cause metaphyseal abnormality. This table shows the average final adult height in different skeletal dysplasias. The average height demonstrated in the Schmidt type chondrodysplasia is between 130 to 160 centimeters. This is a case series in 10 patients who had COL10A1 mutations, where most patients manifested severe short stature less than -3.5 SDS. COL10A1 mutations result in a uniform pattern of growth plate abnormalities, and clinical variability in severity among affected individuals is greater. So with respect to growth hormone treatment in skeletal dysplasia, we have only limited data on the growth hormone treatment in these cases. So the largest database from the KICS data had 748 patients with skeletal dysplasias who were treated with growth hormone, out of which response to growth hormone in the first year was assessed for 3 specific skeletal dysplasias. So the response to growth hormone in skeletal dysplasias is minimal for all 3 diagnoses, ranging between 0.4 to 0.6 delta height SDS. Then we have our own data from OSGROW, which includes 53 patients in whom the growth hormone response was studied. And again, there was very minimal improvement in the growth, especially in the first 12 months. As we can see, the delta height SDS was 0.3. And we cannot say that at 24 and 36 months, there was an improvement. It does say it's 0.6 and 0.8. However, there was wide dispersion. So what happened to final height outcome of AJ? When he completed his growth hormone therapy at 16 years old, his Z-score was minus 1.87. So he might have benefited from growth hormone and orthopedic procedure, and his delta height Z-score was 0.7. So learning points from this case, the management of short stature and skeletal dysplasia needs multidisciplinary approach. Molecular genetics have an important role. It responds to growth hormone therapy is minimal and very few types of skeletal dysplasia studied. So counseling with the families that growth hormone may not improve the final height is important. Thank you.
I've just got a message from Liz that we haven't been keeping to time. So that was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much, Satyakala. Are there any questions?
I have a question. That was really interesting. What's the side effects and the long-term follow-up of the orthopedic procedure? Does he need reoperation? Was it painful? Do they have to go in and take those little pins out?
Yeah, so in the interest of the time, I didn't cover that, but yes, once they've seen some improvement, or regardless of what improvement has been seen, those screws were actually taken off, removed. In fact, these skeletal dysplasias or any skeletal dysplasias, they do describe that they can have problems with joints such as osteoarthritis. And I think with this procedure, so his pain had improved and it had improved his physical activity. I mean, I do have a question to the forum. Use of growth hormone. I was not totally convinced the use of growth hormone in these cases with skeletal dysplasia, given the data available. So I'm just also interested to sort of hear from everyone on use of growth hormone in skeletal dysplasia from your experience.
Well, if I could address that, from my time as chairperson of the Growth Hormone Advisory Committee a long time ago, it was pretty clear that skeletal dysplasias didn't respond at all well. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think we'll have to move on. Sorry, Jerry, go on.
I was saying leg lengthening is probably the best option for the severe skeletal dysplasia such as achondroplasia. You can get 20-25 centimeters extra growth of the lower limb, and increasingly the surgeons are increasing the length of the arm as well to allow better hygienic practices in girls, and in many parts of the world it's the option of choice.
And Louise has commented that knowing the molecular subtype can be helpful for contraindications to growth hormone, for example, cartilage hair hypoplasia, which is prone to malignancy.